You know, when most of us look for a way to fix our lives or figure out the truth, we're essentially looking for a software patch.
Right, a quick fix.
Exactly. We want to just click a button, restart the system, and suddenly, boom, all the bugs in our relationships or our careers are just gone.
It's the ultimate modern impulse, really. I mean,
Yeah.
we're totally conditioned to expect instant clarity.
We want the magic pill.
Yeah, we want this massively complex philosophical answer cleanly packaged into like a 10-second life hack so we can just install it and get on with our day.
But the philosophy we're diving into today completely throws that concept out the window.
Oh, absolutely. It's demanding.
Yeah, it's incredibly specific, and it requires this total rewiring of how you look at effort. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are exploring a really compelling lecture given in Ulsan, South Korea in August of 2026.
It attempts to answer this massive question, how do we actually practice truth in our chaotic everyday lives?
Which is a huge promise. But what makes this text fascinating is the sheer scale of its architecture. I mean, it does not stay in the shallow end of personal self-help.
No, not at all. It builds this very deliberate bridge from the smallest, most frustrating daily habits right up to global healing.
It really does. So our mission today is to unpack that roadmap. We're going to start with your highly personal, everyday actions, and then we'll see how the text connects those actions to sweeping concepts about the historical role of South Korea.
And the societal duty of women.
Right, and a complete redefinition of the baby boomer generation. But before we jump in, I do want to note something for you listening. This source material goes to some pretty intense places.
Yeah, it definitely does.
It contains very strong, highly specific claims about gender roles, it heavily critiques organized religion, and it outlines some really rigid societal duties.
And as your guides, we aren't here to endorse these views or, debate the politics of them.
Exactly. Our job is simply to impartially unpack the mechanics of the arguments presented in the text, so you can examine the architecture of these ideas yourself.
That's the best approach. We're just looking at the internal logic of the text, understanding how the author connects point A to point B, regardless of where anyone might sit on the spectrum of agreement.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core question from the audience in this 2026 lecture is about how to practice truth. But the source defines truth in a way that honestly caught me off guard.
How so?
Well, it doesn't treat it like a moral absolute or some religious doctrine.
No, it treats truth as the literal logic of nature's operation.
Like physics.
Basically, yeah. It defines truth as the underlying mechanical laws of how the universe functions. People often approach truth wanting it to be that magic pill you mentioned, a single, overwhelming realization that instantly untangles their messy lives.
Right.
But the speaker argues that this is fundamentally a misunderstanding. You cannot take an incredibly complex, tangled human life, apply one grand philosophical concept to it, and expect an instant resolution.
So it's not a software patch. It's manual debugging.
That's a great way to put it.
The text is saying you have to go into the code of your life and rewrite it line by line through small, continuous actions.
That is the exact mechanism. The text emphasizes that truth only becomes visible and effective through consistent practical action.
Which sounds exhausting, but makes sense.
Well, the logic is simple but brutal, right?
Yeah.
If your life is difficult or painful right now, it is a direct result of living contrary to nature's logic in the past.
Ouch.
Right. The friction you feel is nature telling you that you're operating incorrectly. To reverse that, you have to find the correct alignment and apply it incrementally.
And this brings us to one of the most practical frameworks in the text, the 70-30 rule. I found this fascinating, but I do need to push back on it a bit.
Go for it.
The text says you have to put in 70% of effort before things get easier. But pushing through 30% of the pain just sounds like, I don't know, a generic motivational poster. How does the text actually define when nature takes over?
It helps to look at it not as a motivational quote, but as an equation of escape velocity.
Okay, like a rocket.
Exactly. Think about a rocket leaving the atmosphere. The first 30% of the journey is violently difficult. The rocket is fighting maximum atmospheric drag and the absolute peak of gravitational pull.
It's just shaking and burning fuel.
Yeah, it burns the vast majority of its fuel just to get off the pad. If you cut the engines at 30%, you don't just float there.
You crash back to Earth.
Catastrophically back to the ground.
So the 30% is the phase where you are burning massive amounts of energy but seeing almost no altitude.
Yes, and this is exactly where the text says most people fail.
Oh, wow.
They put in that 30% effort,
Yeah.
Maybe they start a new habit or try to fix a relationship, and they see a tiny glimmer of light. Immediately, their ego kicks in,
They think they've already won.
right? They think they've arrived, they relax, they start applying their own selfish standards again, and gravity takes over. They crash back to zero.
That is so incredibly common.
The 70-30 rule suggests that only when you reach that 70% threshold does the momentum fundamentally shift. At 70%, you've breached the atmosphere. The friction disappears, nature's momentum takes over, and things start to operate on their own.
I see. So what is the gravity? Like, what is the specific friction keeping people trapped in that bottom 30%?
Ah. Well, the source calls out a massive roadblock.
Right, which it describes as an absolute epidemic, specifically within South Korea, but the mechanics of it feel completely universally applicable.
Yeah, that roadblock is complaining.
Complaining, just everyday complaining.
The source points to complaining as the absolute root of living wrongly. But it's important to understand why the text believes this. It's not just about having a bad attitude.
Right.
The text argues that the entire society has become entangled in a web of complaints, and this complaining literally blocks what it calls heaven's help, or the natural flow of progress.
Let me see if I have this right, because this sounds like a metaphysical claim. The text is saying there is an actual physics to complaining.
According to the source, yes. The logic goes like this. The environment you're in right now, no matter how difficult, was provided by nature for you to learn something specific.
Okay.
When you complain, you are actively rejecting the curriculum. You are emitting a frequency of rejection
And nature responds to that.
by cutting off assistance.
Hmm.
If you blame society, your neighbors, or your circumstances, you distort your own understanding of the problem. You cannot fix a problem if you're fundamentally misdiagnosing the cause.
The historical context the speaker uses to back this up is really striking. They look at post-World War II South Korea. During that time, the country was in absolute ruins, extreme poverty.
Devastated.
Right. Yet the text claims people didn't complain back then.
Because the sheer necessity of survival demanded total focus. Every small step forward was tangible progress. The energy of the nation was entirely directed toward incremental growth.
Which aligns perfectly with nature's laws, according to the text.
Exactly. Because they didn't complain, heaven's help flowed freely, resulting in unprecedented national development.
But now, fast forward to this 2026 lecture, we are in times of incredible abundance. And yet, people complain constantly over minor inconveniences, judging everything based on highly subjective, selfish standards.
Right. We're rejecting the current curriculum.
So if complaining is the friction, stopping the complaints is how we build up that natural momentum. We stop burning fuel on rejection. But where is all that saved energy supposed to go? Because the text pivots sharply here.
It really does.
We aren't just saving energy to have a comfortable, quiet life.
No, this is where the scope of the lecture expands dramatically. The text introduces the concept of South Koreans as the parents of humanity, or the descendants of heaven, referred to as Cheonseon.
I need to stop you there, because that phrase, parents of humanity, carries a ton of weight. Why specifically this nation? Does the text explain the reasoning behind placing that kind of global burden on one specific demographic?
It does, and it roots it in historical and geopolitical context. The source views the Korean peninsula as a unique pressure cooker. It's a nation that was historically nurtured by immense international aid and rapid modernization following the war. The text argues that this compressed growth wasn't a reward, it was a resource allocation from nature.
A resource allocation, like an investment.
Yes, they were given this rapid development not to sit back and be wealthy, but to quickly reach a point where they could turn outward and shoulder the burden of global leadership.
And the imagery used to describe that burden is really visceral. The speaker insists that if the world is hurting, the people of this nation must feel that pain deeply.
They have to internalize it.
The text brings up examples of people starving in Africa or boat people risking their lives at sea. Now, just to contextualize this for you listening, the text uses historical touchstones like boat people, echoing the late 1970s refugee crises, to symbolize the absolute peak of human desperation.
Okay.
The author insists that leaders today must feel that exact same terror in their chest when looking at modern tragedies. It can't just be background noise on the evening news.
The logic is that a parent cannot ignore a crying child. If you are the parents of humanity, your awareness of global suffering must be acute.
You can't just change the channel.
No. The text states that only when you genuinely care about this pain will true innovative wisdom open up within you to help solve these crises. Ignoring the pain of the world while living in comfort is framed as a literal dereliction of historical duty.
But, I mean, how does a normal person actually do this? If I'm just trying to pay my mortgage and raise my kids, how am I supposed to connect with the macro level suffering of humanity?
Well, that is where the source offers a completely radical reframe on the concept of international travel.
This part was a massive paradigm shift for me. The text argues that the way we view traveling abroad is entirely backward.
Completely backward.
It shouldn't be about luxury or taking photos for social media or parading around Paris with designer bags.
The source views international travel as a literal, resource-heavy mission provided by nature. Think about the massive infrastructure, the fuel, the economic systems required to move a human being across the globe. The text argues nature does not provide those resources just so you can consume foreign luxury goods.
It's treating travel as field research. You are supposed to step outside of your localized theoretical information and observe the world firsthand.
Exactly the point. You are traveling to comprehend, not to consume. The text suggests that when you cross borders, you should adopt the mindset of an incognito observer.
Like a researcher.
Yeah. You look at the architecture, yes, but you also look at the social stratification, the struggles of the working class, the systemic pain of that society.
You're gathering data.
You gather this data so that you can return home and synthesize it into wisdom that might eventually help manage the global environment.
Wow. So we have this massive global mission to observe, comprehend, and heal the world's pain. If that is the goal, who is actually supposed to lead the charge? Because the source points to a very specific demographic that needs to take the helm right now.
And that is women. The text's view on gender roles in this specific historical transition is highly structured. It argues that historically, men were tasked with building the physical infrastructure of the world.
The hardware.
Right. They used their physical strength and aggressive energy to shape the environment, build cities, establish industrial systems. But the source insists that the era of relying solely on physical strength is over.
The hardware is built.
Hardware is built. Now, society needs the software. We are in an era where starting things with wisdom is the critical mechanism, and the text assigns that specific role to women.
But the text says women haven't fully stepped into this role because they got derailed. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
The source launches into a relentless critique of religious institutions.
It does. And to understand why, we have to look at the sociological claims the text makes. It asserts that during the rapid industrialization of society, women bore an immense emotional and psychological burden.
Shifting family dynamics, societal upheaval.
Exactly. They were in pain. Seeking solace and guidance, the text claims about 70% of women turned to churches, temples, and spiritual leaders.
But instead of being empowered or taught how to awaken their own internal wisdom to lead society, the lecture describes them as being trapped by blind faith.
Trapped is the word it uses.
It talks about women being taught to bow to rocks and stone statues, relying entirely on external deities to solve their problems, and, handing over their money, which ultimately kept them in a subordinate position.
The core of the critique is that these religious institutions grew massive by keeping people dependent. Instead of fostering independent, wise leaders who could go out and tackle society's problems, they created a feedback loop of reliance.
It made me think of an analogy. It's like someone who wants to get strong, so they buy a gym membership.
Okay.
They bring the plastic membership card home, set it on a pedestal, and worship the card every day, begging it to give them muscles.
Right.
They are putting all their faith in the symbol, completely ignoring the fact that the card was just supposed to get them in the door so they could do the heavy lifting themselves.
That analogy perfectly captures the dynamic the source is criticizing. But the text doesn't just dismiss the symbols entirely. It unpacks a profound psychological metaphor regarding them.
It argues that the rock, or the stone Buddha, or whatever religious symbol was originally meant to be merely an expedient tool.
Right.
What exactly does the text mean by an expedient tool?
It means the object itself has zero inherent power. The power lies entirely in the psychological action it requires of you. The source poses this brilliant question. If you can find it within yourself to shatter your own ego, to be humble enough to bow down entirely to a lifeless rock, why couldn't you take that exact same humility and apply it to your interactions with your family, your coworkers, or your neighbors?
Wow. So the true purpose wasn't to worship the rock at all. The rock was just a training dummy for your ego. It was an exercise in humility so that you could clear out your own arrogance, open up your inherent wisdom, and apply that wisdom to the real living people around you.
Precisely. And the text call to action is unequivocal. It insists that Korean women must realize this mechanism, reject the comfort of blind faith, awaken their own inherent wisdom, and start actively leading society.
And it frames this as a cascading event, right?
Yes. The text claims that the awakening of women in this specific nation is the necessary catalyst to trigger the awakening of women worldwide.
Okay, so we have women called to lead with active wisdom rather than passive faith. But there's another specific group the source identifies as absolutely essential for architecting this new society. And that group is the elders, specifically the baby boomers, and highly educated professionals.
What's fascinating here is how the source completely dismantles and redefines the modern concept of retirement. It specifically targets the demographic of retiring baby boomers, PhDs, and those stepping away from their primary careers.
I have to play devil's advocate here because if you're listening to this and you're nearing retirement, you are probably thinking, wait a minute, I've worked for 40 years, I built the economy. Haven't I earned the right to go play golf and sit on a beach?
Why can't they just rest?
Yeah. Why can't they just rest?
Because the math of human lifespans has changed, and the text argues that society's structure hasn't caught up. We are now looking at human lifespans stretching toward 100 years.
That's a long time.
If you retire at 60, you have 30 or 40 years left.
Yeah.
The text argues that nature does not allow a human being to simply consume resources and rest for 4 decades.
So what is their mandate?
They're viewed as the absolute elders of the nation. They possess vast societal experience, they are free from the daily grind of early career survival, and they hold immense intellectual capital.
So they shouldn't just check out.
No, the text says they must gather together. They need to use their remaining decades to research, collaborate, and sacrifice, to build a blueprint for a world where future generations can thrive.
They have to debug the system they built.
Exactly. They live through the intense growth phases. Now, their job is to look at the society they constructed, recognize its flaws, like the complaining epidemic we discussed earlier, and use their collective intellect to solve those structural issues.
It paints a picture of a very rigid but harmonious societal structure. The source views a balanced society as one where every demographic plays its distinct natural role.
Right.
Elders must act like true elders, meaning they are actively guiding, sacrificing, and providing wisdom. Youth must act like youth, bringing volatile energy and a desire to learn. If the elders retreat to the beach house, the text suggests the entire societal structure becomes unmoored.
Because the youth have no wisdom to anchor their energy.
Yeah.
And we connect this to the bigger picture. The wisdom of the elders is the containment field for the energy of the youth.
Wow.
Without it, the society just burns itself out.
So, what does this all mean? It is a massive, sweeping roadmap we've explored today. It starts at the micro level, debugging our personal lives. We have to stop our endless complaints, recognizing that blaming the environment is rejecting the very curriculum we need to learn.
Exactly.
We have to commit to the 70-30 rule, understanding that the first 30% is just fighting gravity, and we cannot quit until natural momentum takes over.
And from that rigorous personal discipline, the energy we save expands outward. We move to recognizing our global responsibilities.
Like the Chiansen.
We look at the world's pain not as distant data, but as a burden we must shoulder. We transform how we move through the world, turning travel from a luxury consumption into a vital mission of field observation.
And finally, it relies on key demographics waking up to their natural roles. It challenges women to recognize the trap of blind faith, use the expedient tools to shatter their egos, and cultivate active societal wisdom.
And it challenges the baby boomers.
Yes, to look at their retirement not as an ending, but as the most crucial, demanding act of societal leadership they will ever undertake. So, for you listening, whether you are currently navigating a frustrating personal struggle, planning your next international trip, or looking at your own retirement, this text is challenging you to step into a much larger sense of responsibility.
This raises an important question to leave you with, looking at the macro implications of this text. We talked a lot about the baby boomers stepping up as elders.
Yeah.
If complaining truly blocks progress and heaven's help, imagine if every complaint you swallowed and transformed into a proactive step became a tangible unit of energy.
Okay.
If you redirected all the energy you spent complaining about your immediate environment into observing the world's deeper needs, how much power would you personally generate to change the world today?
That is a fascinating thought experiment, a world run by people who have already fought gravity and reached orbit. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking those big questions, keep looking closely at the small actions, and we'll catch you next time.